The stagecoach lurched violently as Willa Sinclair gripped the worn leather seat, her knuckles white beneath her traveling gloves while rain hammered the roof like bullets. And she wondered if agreeing to become a mail-order bride to a complete stranger in the mountains of Colorado had been the worst decision of her life. It was April 1878, and the spring storms had turned the roads into rivers of mud. Willa had left Boston 3 weeks ago with nothing but 2 trunks, her mother's wedding ring, and a handful of letters from a man named Josiah Turner, who claimed to need a wife for his general store in the mining town of Silver Ridge. Those letters had been formal, practical, devoid of romance, but full of promises of security and a home. After her father's death left her penniless, and her only other option was accepting the unwanted advances of her late father's business partner, she had answered Josiah's advertisement with desperate hope. The driver shouted something incomprehensible over the roar of the storm. Willa leaned forward, trying to hear, when the coach suddenly tilted at a sickening angle. She screamed as the world turned sideways, luggage crashing around her, the violent bucking of the vehicle throwing her against the door. Then stillness, broken only by the relentless rain and her own ragged breathing. "Miss, you all right in there?" The driver's voice came muffled through the overturned coach. "I think so," Willa called back, taking inventory of her limbs. Everything seemed intact, though her ribs ached where she had collided with the doorframe. She pushed at the door above her head, but it would not budge. "Roads washed out ahead," the driver yelled. "We are stuck good. I am going to try to get you out." Willa waited in the darkness, her heart pounding. The coach groaned and shifted, and she heard the driver curse. Water was beginning to seep through the floorboards, cold and muddy, soaking through her traveling dress. She pushed harder at the door, panic rising in her chest. "It is no use," the driver said. "The whole thing's wedged against a boulder. I am going for help. There is a trapper's cabin about a mile back. You sit tight, miss." "Wait," Willa cried, but she heard the squelch of boots in mud growing fainter. She was alone. The water was rising. What had been a trickle was now a steady flow, pooling around her hips as she crouched in the overturned coach. Willa renewed her efforts with the door, throwing her shoulder against it until her body ached, but it would not move. The rain showed no signs of stopping, and she could hear something else now, a deep rumbling that seemed to come from the mountain itself. Then she heard it, a voice cutting through the storm. "Hello, anyone in there?" "Yes, please help me," Willa shouted, hope flooding through her. The coach shifted, and suddenly the door above her wrenched open. Rain poured in, and silhouetted against the gray sky was the largest man Willa had ever seen. He had shoulders that seemed to span the width of the doorway, arms thick with muscle that strained against his buckskin shirt as he braced himself against the overturned coach. Dark hair, wet from the rain, hung past his shoulders, and even in the dim light, she could see the sharp angles of his jaw covered in several days of beard growth. "Give me your hand," he commanded, his voice deep and rough as gravel. Willa reached up, and his hand engulfed hers, calloused and strong. He pulled her up with seemingly no effort, lifting her out of the coach and into the downpour. The moment her feet touched the muddy ground, the rumbling grew louder. The man's head snapped toward the mountain, his body going rigid. "God Almighty," he breathed, then his arms were around her, lifting her against his chest as he began to run. "What is happening?" Willa gasped, clinging to his neck. "Mudslide," he said shortly, his long legs eating up the ground despite the treacherous footing. "Big one." Willa looked over his shoulder and felt her blood turn to ice. The entire mountainside seemed to be moving, a wall of mud, rocks, and debris roaring down toward them like a living thing. Trees snapped like matchsticks in its path. The overturned stagecoach disappeared beneath it as if it had never existed. The man veered sharply, heading for an outcropping of rock that jutted from the hillside. He pushed her into the shallow depression beneath the overhang. Then his massive body covered hers completely. His arms braced on either side of her head, his back to the oncoming slide. She could feel every muscle in his body tensed, could feel the solid wall of his chest pressed against her, his heart beating steady and strong despite the terror of the moment. The world became noise and darkness. The mudslide hit like a freight train, and Willa felt the man's body jerk as debris struck his back. She tried to make herself smaller, to give him more protection from the onslaught, but he was immovable, a shield of muscle and bone between her and certain death. Mud and water surged around them, trying to pull them from their shelter, but he had wedged them in tight, his body taking the full force of the slide. Something large struck his back, and Willa felt him grunt with pain, but he did not move, did not give an inch. She pressed her face against his chest, squeezed her eyes shut, and prayed. The roar seemed to go on forever, a deafening cacophony of destruction, and all the while this stranger held her safe, his body absorbing blows that would have killed her. Then, gradually, the sound began to fade. The rumbling grew distant, the battering against his back lessened. Finally, there was only the rain falling softer now and the labored sound of the man's breathing. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice strained. "No," Willa whispered. "Are you? I will live." He pushed himself up slowly, wincing, and helped her out from under the overhang. Willa looked around in shock. The landscape had been completely transformed. Where the road had been was now a river of mud 50 feet wide, still slowly flowing downhill. Trees lay scattered like toys. The stagecoach was gone, buried under tons of debris. If this man had not found her, if he had been even a minute later, she would be dead. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaking. "You saved my life." He turned to look at her properly for the first time, and Willa found herself staring into the most striking eyes she had ever seen, a clear gray like a winter sky. His face was hard, weathered by years of mountain living, but there was something in those eyes that made her breath catch. "Quinton Abbott," he said simply. "My cabin is about 2 miles west. Can you walk?" Willa nodded, though she was not entirely sure her trembling legs would carry her. "Willa Sinclair. And yes, I think so." Quinton's gaze swept over her, assessing. Her traveling dress was ruined, caked in mud, her carefully pinned hair hanging in wet tangles down her back. She must look like a drowned rat. "You are the mail order bride," he said, and it was not a question. "How did you know?" "Saw the stage pass my place earlier. You were the only passenger. And Josiah Turner has been talking about his bride from Boston coming for weeks now." Something flickered in his expression, too quick for Willa to read. "Come on. We need to get you warm and dry." He started walking, and Willa hurried to follow, though his long strides made it difficult. She studied him as they walked. He had to be well over 6 feet tall, with a build that spoke of years of hard physical labor. His buckskin shirt was torn in places, dark stains spreading across his back that Willa realized with horror was blood. "You are bleeding," she said. "Some rocks caught me." "It is nothing. It is not nothing. You are hurt because of me." He glanced back at her, one eyebrow raised. "Would you rather I had left you in that coach?" "Of course not, but then do not worry about a few scratches." He turned forward again, ending the conversation. They walked in silence for a while, Willa struggling to keep up in her heavy, sodden skirts. The rain had finally stopped, and weak sunlight was trying to break through the clouds. The path Quinton followed was barely visible, winding through pine trees and over rocky ground that Willa would never have been able to navigate alone. "How did you know to come looking?" she asked finally. "Heard the coach go over." Knew the driver was an idiot for trying to make it through in this weather. Figured someone might need help. He said it matter-of-factly, as if risking his life for a stranger was the most natural thing in the world. "Well, I am grateful you did. I thought I was going to drown in that coach." Quinton made a non-committal sound but did not respond otherwise. Willa fell silent again, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. Her boots squelched with every step, her dress seemed to weigh 100 pounds, and she was so cold her teeth were chattering. But she did not complain. This man had just saved her life. The least she could do was keep up. The cabin appeared suddenly, nestled in a clearing surrounded by tall pines. It was larger than Willa had expected, built of solid logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch. Behind it stood a well-built barn and several other outbuildings. This was not the rough hovel she had imagined when Quinton said he was a trapper. "You live here alone?" she asked as he led her up the porch steps. "Just me and my dog. He is out hunting." Quinton pushed open the door and gestured for her to enter. The interior was surprisingly neat. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a comfortable-looking chair and a bearskin rug in front of it. A sturdy table with 2 chairs sat near the window. The kitchen area was well-stocked, dried herbs hanging from the rafters, pots and pans arranged neatly on shelves. A ladder led to a loft above. Everything was clean and orderly, nothing like the bachelor's mess she had expected. "Sit by the fire," Quinton said, moving to the fireplace. "I will get it going." Willa sank gratefully into the chair, watching as he expertly built up the fire. Within minutes, flames were crackling cheerfully, throwing welcome heat into the room. Quinton disappeared up the ladder to the loft and returned with a heavy woolen blanket and what looked like a shirt. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," he said, handing her the items. "You can change behind that screen there. The shirt will be too big, but it is dry and warm." Willa took the clothes, her fingers brushing his, and felt an unexpected jolt at the contact. She quickly stood and moved behind the wooden privacy screen in the corner, grateful for his thoughtfulness. As she peeled off her sodden dress and undergarments, she heard him moving around the cabin, the clink of metal, water being poured. The shirt he had given her was indeed enormous, hanging nearly to her knees, but it was soft from many washings and smelled faintly of pine and smoke. She wrapped the blanket around herself and emerged from behind the screen, carrying her wet things. Quinton had removed his own torn, bloody shirt and was standing at the wash basin with his back to her, trying to clean the wounds on his shoulders. Willa stopped short, her breath catching. His back was a landscape of muscle, broad and powerful, but crisscrossed now with angry red gashes where rocks had torn into his flesh. "Let me help you," she said, setting her wet clothes aside and moving toward him before he could protest. "I can manage," he said gruffly. "You cannot even see half of these cuts. Please let me help. It is the least I can do." He hesitated, then gave a short nod and sat down in one of the kitchen chairs, his back to her. Willa took the cloth from the wash basin and began gently cleaning the wounds. Some were deep, still bleeding sluggishly. She worked carefully, aware of every flinch he tried to hide, every tension in those massive shoulders. "This is going to need stitching," she said, examining the worst of the cuts, a 4-inch gash across his left shoulder blade. "Can you do it?" Willa paused. "I have stitched up my share of kitchen accidents and helped the doctor back home a few times when he needed extra hands, but I am not a trained nurse." "Then you know more than me about it. There is a sewing kit in that drawer and whiskey in the cabinet." Willa found both, along with a needle which she held in the fire to sterilize as she had seen the doctor do. Her hands shook slightly as she threaded it, acutely aware of what she was about to do. She poured whiskey over the wound, and Quinton hissed through his teeth but did not move. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "I have had worse." Willa took a deep breath and began. The first pierce of the needle through his skin made her stomach turn, but she forced herself to focus, making small, neat stitches just as she had been taught. Quinton sat perfectly still, his hands gripping the edge of the chair, the muscles in his back rigid. She worked as quickly as she could, murmuring apologies each time the needle went through. When she finally tied off the last stitch, her hands were trembling. "There are a few other cuts that are deep but not quite as bad. I can stitch those too if you want, or we can just bandage them." "Bandage is fine for the rest." Willa cleaned and wrapped the other wounds, her fingers gentle against his skin. She was intensely aware of him, of the heat radiating from his body, of the way his muscles shifted beneath her touch. When she finished, she stepped back quickly, feeling flushed. "All done," she said softly. Quinton stood and reached for a clean shirt, pulling it on carefully over his bandaged back. When he turned to face her, something in his expression had softened slightly. "Thank you. You saved my life. It is the least I could do." Willa wrapped the blanket more tightly around herself, suddenly very aware that she was wearing nothing but his shirt. "What happens now? Now you rest. Tomorrow, when the weather clears, I will take you down to Silver Ridge. It is about a 6-hour ride from here, but with the mudslide, we will have to go the long way around. Probably take us most of the day." Willa nodded, trying to ignore the strange sinking feeling in her chest at the thought of leaving. "And my belongings. Everything I owned was in those trunks." "Buried under half a mountain by now," Quinton said, not unkindly. "I am sorry, but you are alive, and that is what matters." He was right, of course. She was alive, miraculously so. But everything she had brought with her, her mother's jewelry, her few good dresses, the small amount of money she had saved, all of it was gone. She would arrive to meet her intended husband with literally nothing but the clothes on her back, and even those were borrowed. "Hey," Quinton said, and she looked up to find him watching her with an unexpected gentleness in those gray eyes. "You have been through a hell of an ordeal today. Do not worry about tomorrow right now. You are safe, you are warm, and you are alive. That is enough for tonight." Willa felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. She had not cried through any of it, the coach overturning, the mudslide, the fear. She would not cry now. But Quinton's kindness, after everything, threatened to break through her careful control. "You are right," she said, her voice only slightly unsteady. "Thank you for everything." He nodded and moved to the kitchen area. "You must be hungry. Let me fix us something to eat." Willa watched as he moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, slicing bread and cheese, frying bacon in a heavy iron skillet. The domestic scene felt surreal after the terror of the afternoon. She should be in Silver Ridge right now, meeting Josiah Turner for the first time, beginning her new life. Instead, she was in a mountain cabin wearing a stranger's shirt, watching that same stranger cook dinner for her after he had literally saved her life. "Tell me about yourself," she said suddenly. "You know I am a mail-order bride from Boston, but I know nothing about you except that you are brave and you live alone." Quinton glanced at her over his shoulder, surprise flickering across his face as if he was not used to people asking about him. "Not much to tell. I have been trapping and hunting in these mountains for about 8 years now. I trade furs down in Silver Ridge a few times a year, keep to myself otherwise. 8 years is a long time to be alone. I am not alone. I have my dog, my work, the mountain. It is enough." But something in the way he said it made Willa wonder if it really was enough, or if he had just convinced himself it should be. "Where are you from originally?" He was quiet for a moment, focusing on the bacon. "Missouri. Left when I was 18 and never looked back." There was a story there, Willa could tell, but she did not push. Everyone had reasons for leaving their old lives behind. God knew she did. Quinton brought the food to the table and they ate in companionable silence. Willa was hungrier than she had realized, and the simple meal tasted better than any fancy Boston dinner she could remember. When they finished, exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. "You take the bed in the loft," Quinton said, clearing the dishes. "I will sleep down here." "I cannot take your bed," Willa protested. "You can and you will. You have been through enough today." His tone brooked no argument. Too tired to fight, Willa climbed the ladder to the loft. The bed was simple but comfortable, covered with thick quilts and furs. She crawled under them gratefully, sinking into the mattress. Through the open loft, she could see Quinton banking the fire and spreading blankets on the floor in front of it. "Quinton," she called softly. "Yes, thank you for everything, I mean it." There was a pause, then his deep voice drifted up to her. "Get some sleep, Willa." She closed her eyes, expecting to lie awake replaying the day's events, but sleep claimed her almost immediately, deep and dreamless. When Willa woke, sunlight was streaming through the loft window and she could smell coffee brewing. She sat up, momentarily disoriented, then the events of yesterday came rushing back. The mudslide, Quinton's body shielding hers, the feel of his skin beneath her fingers as she stitched his wounds. She climbed down the ladder to find Quinton at the stove, already dressed, his hair tied back with a leather cord. A large dog, some mix of wolf and hound, sat at his feet, watching her with intelligent amber eyes. "This is Ghost," Quinton said, following her gaze. "He showed up this morning." "Ghost, this is Willa. She is a friend." The dog came over and sniffed Willa's hand, then apparently decided she was acceptable because his tail wagged once. "He is beautiful," Willa said, scratching behind the dog's ears, "though he does not look much like a ghost. He got the name because he can move through the forest without making a sound. I have seen him walk up on deer that never knew he was there." Quinton poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed her one. "How are you feeling?" "Surprisingly well, all things considered. How is your back?" "Sore but healing. You did a good job with those stitches." He paused, studying her face. "I need to tell you something. I rode out at first light to check the damage from the slide. The main road is completely blocked. Could take weeks to clear it." Willa set down her coffee cup carefully. "So we cannot get to Silver Ridge, not the usual way. There is another route, but it is rough going. Take us at least 2 days, maybe 3 on horseback, and that is assuming you can ride." "I can ride," Willa said, though it had been years since she had been on a horse. "But 2 days." "Will not Mr. Turner be worried? He was expecting me yesterday. Word will have reached Silver Ridge by now about the mudslide. He will know the coach did not make it through. I can take you the long way, or you can wait here until the road is cleared, but that could be weeks." Quinton refilled his own coffee, not quite meeting her eyes. "Your choice." Willa considered. Staying here alone with Quinton for weeks would be highly improper, though after everything that had happened, propriety seemed like a distant concern. But Josiah Turner was expecting his bride, and she had already cost the man enough worry. "I think we should go. The sooner I get to Silver Ridge, the better." Something flickered across Quinton's face, so quick she almost missed it. Disappointment. But that made no sense. "We will leave after breakfast then. I will pack supplies. Do you want your dress? It is dry now, though it is pretty stained." "I will wear it," Willa said. The dress might be ruined, but it was hers and she had precious little else. She changed behind the screen again, struggling with the buttons and laces without her corset, which had been so caked in mud she had left it to soak. The dress hung differently without it, looser and more comfortable. When she emerged, Quinton was packing saddlebags with practiced efficiency. "Can I help?" she asked. "You can wrap some of that bread and cheese for the journey." They worked together in easy silence, and Willa marveled at how comfortable she felt with this man she had known less than a day. There was something solid about him, dependable. He did not fill the silence with empty chatter, did not make her feel like she had to perform or pretend. She could just be. Within an hour, they were ready to leave. Quinton had 2 horses, a large gray stallion for himself and a smaller chestnut mare that he helped Willa mount. Ghost trotted alongside as they set out, heading west into the mountains. The journey was harder than Willa had anticipated. The trail was steep and rocky, winding through dense forest and across rushing streams swollen with snowmelt. Her thighs ached from gripping the saddle, her hands were blistered from the reins, but she did not complain. Quinton set a steady pace, frequently checking over his shoulder to make sure she was managing, slowing when the trail got particularly rough. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat. Quinton led them to a small clearing with a view that took Willa's breath away. Mountains stretched in every direction, their peaks still white with snow, the valleys below carpeted in endless green. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "It is home," Quinton said simply, then seemed surprised by his own words. "How did you end up here?" Willa asked, settling on a fallen log. "In these specific mountains, I mean." Quinton was quiet for a long moment, gazing out at the view. "After I left Missouri, I drifted for a while. Worked ranches in Texas, tried mining in California, spent a year as a scout for the Army. Nothing felt right. Then about 8 years ago, I was guiding a hunting party through these mountains, and I just knew this was where I was supposed to be." He glanced at her. "I know that probably sounds foolish. Not at all. I think we all hope to find that place where we belong." "Is that why you became a mail-order bride, looking for where you belong?" Willa considered how much to tell him. "My father died 6 months ago. He left debts I did not know about. Everything we had went to pay them, including our home. I had nowhere to go, no prospects. My father's business partner offered to help me, but the price was too high." Quinton's jaw tightened. "He wanted you to become his mistress. Among other things, yes. So when I saw Mr. Turner's advertisement, it seemed like an answer to a prayer, an honorable proposal, a home, a chance to start over." She looked down at her hands. "Though I suppose starting over with nothing but borrowed clothes was not quite what I imagined." "Josiah Turner is a good man," Quinton said slowly. "His store is successful. He will provide for you well. You sound like you know him." "Everyone knows everyone in Silver Ridge. It is not a big town." Quinton stood abruptly. "We should keep moving, want to make good distance before dark." They rode through the afternoon, the sun warm on Willa's face, the air sweet with pine. She found herself watching Quinton as he rode ahead of her. The way he moved with his horse, completely at ease. The breadth of his shoulders, the strength in his hands as he controlled the reins. She thought about those same hands pulling her from the overturned coach, about his body shielding hers from the mudslide, about the scars on his back that he would carry now because of her. When the sun began to sink toward the horizon, Quinton led them to a sheltered spot near a stream. "We will camp here for the night," he said, dismounting. Willa slid off her horse with a groan she could not quite suppress. Every muscle in her body hurt. Quinton caught her as her legs buckled, his hand steadying at her waist. "Sorry," she gasped. "It has been a while since I rode." "You did well," he said, and there was genuine respect in his voice. "A lot of women would have complained the whole way. I am tougher than I look." His eyes met hers and something passed between them, a spark of connection that made Willa's breath catch. Then Quinton stepped back, releasing her, and the moment was broken. "I will take care of the horses," he said. "You gather some firewood." They made camp with the ease of a well-practiced team, though they had never done this before. Quinton built a fire while Willa laid out bedrolls. He caught fish from the stream and cooked them over the flames while she boiled coffee. When they sat down to eat, the stars were coming out, bright and numerous in a way they never were in Boston. "I have never seen so many stars," Willa said, staring up in wonder. "No city lights out here to hide them." Quinton leaned back against a log, his long legs stretched toward the fire. "You will miss it, I imagine. The city." "I thought I would, but I do not know any more. There is something about this place, something wild and free. I can understand why you love it." They talked late into the night, about everything and nothing. Quinton told her about tracking elk through the high country, about the time a grizzly bear tried to get into his cabin, about the harsh beauty of winter in the mountains. Willa told him about growing up in Boston, about her love of reading, about how her father used to take her to the harbor to watch the ships. "What will you do in Silver Ridge?" Quinton asked eventually. "Josiah will expect you to help run the store, most likely." "I can do that. I helped my father with his accounting for years. I am good with numbers and I do not mind hard work." Willa poked at the fire with a stick. "It will be a good life, I think, a practical one, but not a romantic one." Willa looked up sharply. "Romance is for novels. Real life requires practicality." "Does it?" Quinton was watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Seems to me that is a sad way to live. Easy to say when you are not a woman alone with no money and no prospects," Willa retorted, more sharply than she intended. "I made the best choice available to me. I am not criticizing. I just think you deserve more than a practical marriage to a man you have never met." "And what do I deserve, in your opinion?" The question came out softer than she meant, almost wistful. Quinton held her gaze for a long moment. "To be loved, to be cherished, to have someone who looks at you and sees not just a solution to a problem, but the answer to everything." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Willa's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Quinton," she whispered, not even sure what she was going to say. He stood abruptly. "You should get some sleep. We have another long day tomorrow." Willa watched as he walked to the edge of their camp, standing with his back to her, staring out into the darkness. She wanted to follow him, to ask what he had meant by those words, but fear held her frozen. Instead, she crawled into her bedroll, but sleep was a long time coming. The next day dawned gray and overcast. They broke camp in silence, the easy camaraderie of the previous days replaced by an awkward tension. Quinton barely looked at her as they rode, keeping his gaze fixed on the trail ahead. Around midday, the first drops of rain began to fall. Within minutes, it became a downpour. Quinton pulled his horse to a stop and pointed to a rocky overhang ahead. "We will wait it out there." They huddled under the overhang, watching sheets of rain sweep across the valley below. The horses stood patiently, tails to the wind. Ghost shook himself, spraying water everywhere, then settled at Quinton's feet. "Does this remind you of the mudslide?" Quinton asked quietly. Willa shuddered. "A bit, though I feel much safer now. I was terrified, you know, when I saw that wall of mud coming and knew I could not outrun it." "You did not seem terrified. You seemed completely in control." Quinton turned to look at her, rain dripping from his hair. "I thought we were both going to die. And all I could think was that I had just met you, that I did not even know you, but I was going to die trying to save you, and I did not regret it for a second." "Why are you telling me this?" Willa whispered. "Because tomorrow we will reach Silver Ridge and you will marry Josiah Turner, and I will go back to my cabin, and we will probably never see each other again. And I need you to know that these 2 days, knowing you, they have meant something to me. You mean something to me." "Quinton, let me finish, please." He took a breath. "I know you have an agreement with Josiah. I know you need security, a home. I have no right to interfere with that. But I also cannot let you go without telling you that if things were different, if you were not promised to another man, I would ask you to stay. With me." Willa felt like she could not breathe. "You barely know me. I know that you are brave. I know you are strong. I know that you stitched up my back with gentle hands even though you were shaking, and that you did not complain once on this whole difficult journey, and that when you smile, really smile, it is like the sun coming out from behind clouds." His voice was rough with emotion. "I know that I have lived alone in these mountains for 8 years and been content, and then you dropped into my life during a mudslide and suddenly content is not enough anymore." "I do not know what to say," Willa breathed. "Then do not say anything. Just think about it. Think about what you really want, not just what is practical or expected, but what would make you truly happy." The rain continued to fall, but Willa barely noticed. She was lost in Quinton's eyes, in the raw honesty she saw there. This strong, self-sufficient man was offering her his heart, and she found herself wanting desperately to take it. "What kind of life could you offer me?" she asked. "And I am not asking because I need wealth or luxury, but because I need to understand what you are proposing. An honest one. I do not have much money, but I have my cabin, my land, my skills. We would not go hungry. It would be hard work, especially in winter and lonely at times. You would be miles from the nearest town, from other women, from society. But you would be free. Free to be yourself, to read by the fire, to explore the mountains, to live without pretense or expectation." He paused. "And you would be loved, Willa. God help me, but I am already halfway in love with you, and I think given time, I could love you more than I knew was possible." Tears were sliding down Willa's cheeks now, mixing with the rain. "I made a promise to Josiah Turner. I know. He has been waiting for me, planning for me. I cannot just abandon him. I know that too." Quinton reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "All I am asking is that you think about what you truly want. And if that is still a practical marriage to Josiah, then I will take you to Silver Ridge tomorrow and wish you all the happiness in the world. But if there is any part of you that wants something different, that wants what I am offering, then you need to follow that before it is too late." "I am scared," Willa admitted. "So am I." Quinton smiled then, and it transformed his whole face, making him look younger, more vulnerable. "But maybe being scared together is better than being safe and alone." The rain was slowing, sunlight beginning to break through the clouds. Quinton stood and offered Willa his hand. "Come on. We should keep moving while the weather holds." They rode in silence for the rest of the afternoon, but it was a different silence now, charged with possibility. Willa's mind was spinning. Everything Quinton had said echoed in her thoughts. Could she really do it? Could she abandon her plans, her promise, for a man she had known only 2 days? But they had been the most intense 2 days of her life. She had seen Quinton at his best and his most vulnerable. She had seen his courage, his kindness, his strength. And she had felt something with him that she had never expected to feel, a connection that went deeper than words. When she tried to imagine her future with Josiah Turner, it was blank. She could not picture his face, could not imagine feeling anything for him beyond polite gratitude. But when she imagined a future with Quinton, she saw laughter and adventure, hard work and quiet evenings by the fire, a partnership built on respect and affection and, yes, love. As the sun set, they made camp in another sheltered clearing. Quinton was quiet as he built the fire, his movements economical and precise. Willa watched him, memorizing every detail. The way his muscles moved beneath his shirt, the concentration on his face as he worked, the gentleness in his hands despite their size and strength. "Quinton," she said suddenly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." He looked up. "All right. If I chose to stay with you, would it be enough? Or would you eventually resent me for tying you to one place, for ending the solitary life you have built?" Quinton set down the stick he had been using to stoke the fire and came to sit beside her. "I built that solitary life because I thought it was what I wanted. I thought if I could not have everything, if I could not have a family and love and connection, then I was better off having nothing. I was wrong. These past 2 days with you have shown me what I have been missing, what I have been too afraid to want. So no, I would not resent you. You would be the best thing that ever happened to me. What about children? Do you want them? Someday, yes. Do you?" Willa nodded. "I always thought I would have children. Before my father died, I imagined a completely different future. A husband I chose for love, a house full of children and laughter. Then reality intervened and I had to adjust my expectations." "Maybe you do not have to adjust as much as you thought," Quinton said softly. "Maybe you can still have that future, just in a different setting than you imagined. In a cabin in the mountains instead of a house in town. With a mountain man instead of a shopkeeper." His eyes searched hers. "Would that be so terrible?" "No," Willa whispered. "I do not think it would be terrible at all. I think it might be wonderful." Quinton's breath caught. "Willa, are you saying—" "I am saying that I do not want to marry Josiah Turner. I am saying that when I think about tomorrow, about reaching Silver Ridge and saying goodbye to you, my heart breaks. I am saying that practical and safe sound hollow compared to being with you." She took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I am saying yes, Quinton. Yes to staying. Yes to building a life with you. Yes to everything." For a moment, Quinton just stared at her as if he could not quite believe what he was hearing. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, and she did not care. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing her face against his chest, feeling the solid strength of him, the reality of him. "I will make you happy," he said fiercely into her hair. "I swear to you, Willa, I will spend every day trying to make you happy." "You already do," she said, pulling back to look at him. "Just by being you." Quinton cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones, and Willa saw everything she needed to see in his eyes. Love, yes, but also respect, admiration, tenderness. He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away, but she did not want to pull away. She wanted him, with an intensity that shocked her. When his lips met hers, it was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might shatter. But Willa pressed closer, deepening the kiss, and Quinton made a sound low in his throat that sent heat racing through her veins. His arms tightened around her, one hand tangling in her hair, and Willa lost herself in the sensation, in the taste and feel of him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinton rested his forehead against hers. "We should wait," he said, his voice rough. "Do this properly. I want to marry you, Willa. I want you to be my wife, not just in the eyes of God but in the eyes of the law." "Then we will wait," Willa agreed, though every fiber of her being wanted to pull him back to her. "But we will marry soon. Very soon." Quinton laughed, the sound full of joy. "As soon as we can find a preacher, I promise you that." They sat together by the fire, Willa leaning against Quinton's chest, his arms wrapped around her. It felt right in a way nothing else in her life had felt right before. She thought about the terrified woman who had climbed into the stagecoach in Boston 3 weeks ago, never imagining where that journey would lead. If someone had told her she would end up choosing a mountain man over a shopkeeper, choosing love over security, she would have thought them mad. But here she was, and she had never been more certain of anything in her life. "We still need to go to Silver Ridge tomorrow," Quinton said eventually. "You need to tell Josiah yourself. He deserves that much. I know. I am not looking forward to it. He is a good man. He will understand, even if he is disappointed. I hope you are right." Willa tilted her head back to look at Quinton. Will people think I am scandalous? Running off with you instead of marrying the man I came to marry? Probably. Does it bother you? Willa considered. A month ago, the thought of being the subject of gossip would have horrified her. But that was before the mudslide, before Quinton, before she learned that there were more important things than what other people thought. No, she said. Let them talk. I know the truth, and so do you. That is all that matters. They talked late into the night again, but this time it was about the future instead of the past. Quinton described his cabin in more detail, the repairs and improvements he wanted to make, how they could expand the garden, where they might build on an extra room when children came. Willa told him about her love of books, and he promised to take her to Denver once a year to buy as many as she wanted. They planned and dreamed, and with every word, Willa felt more certain that she had made the right choice. When they finally settled into their bedrolls, Quinton pulled his close to hers so they could hold hands across the space between them. "Sleep well, my love," he murmured. "My love," Willa repeated, testing the words. They felt perfect on her tongue. "Good night, Quinton." The next morning dawned clear and bright. They broke camp for the last time, and as they rode toward Silver Ridge, Willa felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. She was not looking forward to disappointing Josiah Turner, but she was excited to start her new life with Quinton. Silver Ridge appeared in the valley below them around midday. It was larger than Willa had expected, a proper town with a main street lined with shops and businesses, houses scattered on the hillsides, the skeletal frames of mine works visible in the distance. "The general store is on Main Street," Quinton said. "Big white building with green shutters. You cannot miss it." They rode down into town, drawing curious looks from the people they passed. Willa kept her chin high, her hand steady on the reins. Let them look. She had nothing to be ashamed of. Quinton stopped in front of the general store and helped Willa dismount. Through the window, she could see a man behind the counter, middle-aged and balding, wearing spectacles. Josiah Turner, presumably. "You want me to come in with you?" Quinton asked. Willa shook her head. "I need to do this myself, but wait for me. I will be right here." Willa took a deep breath and pushed open the door. A bell jingled overhead. The man behind the counter looked up, and his face lit with recognition and relief. "Miss Sinclair, thank God you are alive. We heard about the mudslide, the destroyed coach. I feared the worst." He came around the counter, reaching for her hands. "You are not hurt." "I am fine, Mr. Turner, thanks to the man who saved me. Then I owe him a great debt." Josiah Turner was exactly as his letters had suggested, practical, earnest, kind-faced. A good man, just not the right man for her. "Mr. Turner, we need to talk, privately if possible." Something in her tone made his expression shift from relief to concern. He led her to a small office at the back of the store and closed the door. "What is wrong, Miss Sinclair?" Willa clasped her hands together to keep them from shaking. "Mr. Turner, I owe you an apology and an explanation. I came to Colorado with every intention of honoring our agreement, of becoming your wife and helping you build a life here. But circumstances have changed." "Changed how?" "The man who saved me from the mudslide, who sheltered me and protected me, I have developed feelings for him. Strong feelings. And he for me." Willa forced herself to meet Josiah's eyes. "I cannot marry you, Mr. Turner. It would not be fair to either of us. You deserve a wife who can give you her whole heart, and mine belongs to someone else." Josiah was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he sighed and sat down heavily in his chair. "I cannot say I am not disappointed. I had high hopes for our future together, but I would be lying if I said I was entirely surprised. You are not, Miss Sinclair. You have the look of a woman in love. I saw it the moment you walked through that door, and I am many things, but I am not so desperate or foolish as to try to hold a woman to a promise when her heart is elsewhere." He managed a small smile. "This man, he is a good man. He will treat you well." "He is the best man I have ever known," Willa said softly. "He risked his life for me without hesitation. He has been nothing but honorable and kind. And yes, I believe he will treat me very well indeed. Then I wish you both all the happiness in the world." Josiah stood and offered his hand. "I hope you will not think ill of me, Miss Sinclair, but I must confess that, while I am disappointed, I am also somewhat relieved. I think we would have made a practical match, but not a love match, and perhaps I too deserve to hold out for the possibility of the latter." Willa felt tears prick her eyes at his kindness. She ignored his offered hand and hugged him instead. "You are a good man, Josiah Turner. You will find the right woman, I am sure of it. And you have clearly found the right man. Go to him. Be happy." Willa left the store to find Quinton exactly where she had left him, leaning against a post, his hat pulled low against the sun. When he saw her, he straightened, searching her face. "How did it go?" He was disappointed but understanding. "He wished us well." Willa smiled. "Now we just need to find a preacher." Quinton's answering grin was brilliant. "I know just the man. Reverend Michaels. He runs the church at the end of town. If we are lucky, he can marry us today." They found Reverend Michaels in his small church, a kindly older man with white hair and a gentle manner. When Quinton explained what they wanted, the Reverend raised his eyebrows. "Today? You want to be married today?" "Yes, sir," Quinton said firmly. "We have witnesses if you need them. We can pay you whatever is proper, but I want to marry this woman as soon as possible." The Reverend looked between them, taking in Quinton's determined expression and Willa's hopeful one. Then he chuckled. "Well, I am not one to stand in the way of young love. Do you have rings?" Willa's heart sank. She had not thought of that, but Quinton reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. From it, he withdrew a simple gold band. "It was my mother's," he said quietly, holding it out to Willa. "The only thing I kept when I left Missouri. I would be honored if you would wear it." Willa could barely speak around the lump in her throat. "It is perfect." "Then let us proceed," Reverend Michaels said. "I will just need to fetch my wife to serve as a witness. Mr. Abbott, perhaps you could find one more." Quinton stepped outside and returned minutes later with the blacksmith from across the street, a burly man named Henderson who looked confused but willing. The Reverend's wife, a plump, cheerful woman named Martha, fussed over Willa, straightening her hair and brushing dust from her ruined dress. "It is not the fancy wedding I am sure you dreamed of," Martha whispered apologetically. "It is exactly the wedding I want," Willa replied, and meant it with all her heart. They stood before Reverend Michaels in the simple church. No flowers or music or fancy clothes, just two people pledging their lives to each other. When Quinton took Willa's hand in his grip was strong and sure. When he repeated his vows, his deep voice never wavered. "I, Quinton James Abbott, take you, Willa Rose Sinclair, to be my wedded wife. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." Willa's voice shook as she repeated her own vows, but she looked into Quinton's gray eyes and found her strength there. When he slipped his mother's ring onto her finger, tears spilled down her cheeks. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Michaels said with a smile. "Mr. Abbott, you may kiss your bride." Quinton cupped Willa's face gently in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they broke apart, Martha was crying happily, Henderson was grinning, and the Reverend was beaming. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Abbott," he said. "May God bless your union with many years of happiness." They signed the marriage certificate, Quinton's handwriting bold and clear, Willa's more delicate. When it was done, when it was official, Willa looked down at the ring on her finger and felt a sense of peace settle over her. She was married to Quinton, her mountain man, her protector, her love. They left the church as husband and wife, stepping out into the bright Colorado afternoon. Quinton lifted Willa onto her horse, his hands lingering at her waist. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Abbott?" he asked. "More than ready," Willa replied. They rode out of Silver Ridge together, Ghost trotting alongside, heading back into the mountains. This time, Willa was not running from anything. She was running toward something, toward a future she had not known she wanted until it was offered to her. The journey back to the cabin took them the rest of the day and into the evening. When they finally rode into the clearing and Willa saw the cabin silhouetted against the darkening sky, she felt a swell of emotion. This was home now, hers and Quinton's. Quinton helped her down from her horse and pulled her into his arms. "Welcome home, wife," he murmured against her hair. "Home," Willa repeated, and the word had never sounded sweeter. They took care of the horses together, then went inside. Quinton built up the fire while Willa lit the oil lamps, and the cabin filled with warm light. When Quinton turned to her, the look in his eyes made Willa's breath catch. "I know we have only known each other a few days," he said, crossing to her. "And I know this has all happened so fast, but I need you to know that I meant every word of those vows. You are mine now, Willa, and I am yours, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice." "I already know I did," Willa said, reaching up to touch his face. The beard was rough under her fingers, but she loved it, loved everything about him. "I have never been more certain of anything." Quinton kissed her then, and there was nothing gentle about it this time. It was hungry, demanding, full of all the longing they had been holding back. Willa kissed him back with equal fervor, her fingers tangling in his long hair, pulling him closer. His hands moved to her waist, then lower, lifting her against him, and she wrapped her legs around his hips instinctively. He carried her to the ladder leading to the loft, and they climbed it together, barely breaking the kiss. The loft was cast in shadows, the only light coming from the fire below. Quinton laid Willa on the bed with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity of his kisses. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough. "We can wait if you want to wait." "I am sure," Willa breathed. "I want this. I want you." What followed was tender and passionate, Quinton taking his time despite the urgency between them, making sure Willa was ready, that she was with him every step of the way. When they finally came together, Willa cried out, not in pain but in pleasure and wonder. This was what it was supposed to be like, this joining, this connection. Not duty or obligation, but love and desire, and two souls becoming one. Afterwards, they lay tangled together under the quilts, Quinton's strong arms around her, Willa's head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Ghost had settled on the floor below, and the fire crackled softly, and Willa felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. "What are you thinking?" Quinton asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I am happy," Willa said simply. "Happier than I have ever been in my entire life. Is that foolish, to be so happy so quickly?" "If it is foolish, then I am a fool too," Quinton said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Because I feel the same way." They talked quietly as they drifted toward sleep, making plans for tomorrow, for next week, for next year. Quinton wanted to teach Willa to shoot and fish and track. Willa wanted to plant a garden, maybe get some chickens. They talked about winterizing the cabin, about building an addition, about all the small and large things that made up a life together. "You think you will miss Boston?" Quinton asked at one point. Willa considered. "I will miss some things. The libraries, the theaters, certain friends, but I do not miss the life I had there, if that makes sense. That life was confining, full of expectations and rules about who I should be and how I should behave. Here I can just be myself. I like yourself very much, Quinton said with a smile in his voice. I like yourself too. Willa yawned. Even if you do snore. I do not snore. You do, but I find it endearing. Quinton laughed and pulled her closer, and Willa closed her eyes, utterly at peace. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Willa was surprised by how quickly she adapted to life in the mountains. The work was hard, hauling water from the stream, keeping the cabin clean, learning to cook over the fireplace instead of a proper stove. But it was also deeply satisfying in a way her old life had never been. Quinton was patient as he taught her the skills she would need. How to shoot his rifle, how to gut and clean a fish, how to read the signs of changing weather. In turn, Willa taught him things he had forgotten in his years alone, how to darn socks properly, how to make a cabin feel like a home rather than just a place to sleep. They fell more in love with each passing day. Quinton would come in from checking his trap lines and seek out Willa just to kiss her, as if he still could not quite believe she was real, that she was his. Willa would wake before dawn and watch him sleep, marveling at this strong, gentle man who had chosen her, who loved her. One morning about 2 weeks after their wedding, Willa woke to find Quinton already up, moving around the cabin below. She climbed down the ladder to find him packing supplies into saddlebags. "Where are you going?" she asked, wrapping a blanket around herself. "We are going," he corrected with a smile. "I want to show you something, pack enough for 2 nights. "What is it?" A surprise. "Do you trust me?" "With my life," Willa said, and meant it absolutely. They set out after breakfast, riding deeper into the mountains than Willa had been before. The trail grew steeper, the air thinner, but the views were breathtaking. They camped that night beside a crystal-clear lake that reflected the stars like a mirror. "This is beautiful," Willa breathed, standing at the water's edge. "Wait until tomorrow," Quinton said mysteriously. The next day they climbed higher still, until Willa's lungs burned and her legs ached. Just when she thought she could not go another step, Quinton helped her over a final rocky outcrop and she gasped. They stood on top of the world. Mountains stretched in every direction as far as the eye could see, their peaks touching the sky. An eagle soared on the thermals below them. The wind was fierce and wild, and Willa felt like if she spread her arms, she might fly. "I wanted you to see this," Quinton said, coming to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "To understand what it means to me to be up here, to feel small and insignificant but also part of something vast and eternal." "It is magnificent," Willa said, leaning back against him. "Thank you for sharing this with me." "Everything I have is yours now," Quinton said simply. "My mountains, my life, my heart, all of it." Willa turned in his arms and kissed him there on top of the world and felt like the luckiest woman alive. They stayed on the mountain for hours, exploring, talking, simply being together. When they finally made their way back down to camp, Willa felt changed somehow, more grounded and yet more free than she had ever felt before. That night, lying in Quinton's arms under the stars, Willa thought about the stagecoach journey that had brought her here, about the mudslide that could have ended her life, but instead had given her a new one. If she had arrived in Silver Ridge safely, if she had married Josiah Turner as planned, she would never have known what it felt like to be truly, deeply loved. She would never have known Quinton, never have experienced this wild, wonderful life in the mountains. "What are you thinking about?" Quinton asked, feeling her wakefulness. "About fate," Willa said. "About how sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things. If that mudslide had not happened, we never would have met." "I have thought about that too," Quinton admitted. "Part of me feels guilty, being grateful for something that could have killed you, but I cannot help it. That mudslide brought you to me, and I will be grateful for that for the rest of my life." "Then let us both be grateful," Willa said. "For the mudslide, for the mountains, for finding each other when neither of us was even looking." Summer came to the mountains, warm and green and abundant. Willa's garden flourished, providing fresh vegetables to supplement the meat Quinton hunted and the fish they caught from the stream. She found joy in the simple rhythms of their days, in working side by side with her husband, in the quiet evenings reading by the fire while Quinton carved or mended his equipment. They made the long journey to Denver in late July, and Quinton kept his promise, buying Willa an entire crate of books from a shop that made her eyes light up like a child's at Christmas. They stayed in a hotel for 3 nights, their first time in a real bed since their wedding night, and enjoyed the novelty of city life before eagerly returning to their mountain home. "Did you miss it?" Quinton asked as they rode back into their clearing. "The city?" "Not even a little bit," Willa admitted. "All I wanted was to come home, to our cabin, our life. Is that strange?" "Not to me." Quinton helped her down from her horse and kissed her soundly. "You are a mountain woman now, Willa Abbott." "I suppose I am," Willa agreed, and she could not keep the pride out of her voice. In late August, Willa woke one morning feeling queasy. She attributed it to something she had eaten and thought nothing of it. But when it happened again the next day and the day after that, Quinton looked at her with a knowing expression. "How late are you?" he asked gently. Willa froze, counting back in her mind. 6 weeks, maybe 7. She pressed a hand to her stomach, wonder blooming in her chest. "I think I might be pregnant," she whispered. The joy on Quinton's face was like the sun breaking through clouds. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, before setting her down carefully as if she were made of glass. "A baby," he said, his voice filled with awe. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Willa asked, though she could already see the answer in his eyes. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Quinton said, dropping to his knees in front of her and pressing his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I cannot wait to meet you." Tears streamed down Willa's cheeks as she ran her fingers through Quinton's hair. A baby. Their baby. The family she had always wanted, here in this wild place with this wonderful man. The pregnancy was difficult at times. The morning sickness lasted for months, and there were days when Willa felt so tired she could barely move. But Quinton was endlessly patient, taking over her chores without complaint, holding her when she cried from the sheer, overwhelming reality of what was happening to her body. As her belly grew, Quinton became almost comically protective. He barely let her lift anything heavier than a book. He patted every corner of the cabin lest she bump into it. He made her rest constantly, bringing her meals and tea and whatever else she needed. "I am pregnant, not made of porcelain," Willa protested one day as he insisted on carrying her up to the loft. "You are carrying the most precious cargo in the world," Quinton replied. "Our child. Let me take care of you both." How could she argue with that? Winter came early that year. By October, snow was falling, and by November they were snowed in completely, the drifts reaching halfway up the cabin walls. But Willa did not mind. The cabin was cozy and warm, well stocked with food and supplies. And she had Quinton, who read to her by the fire, who rubbed her aching back and swollen feet, who talked to their unborn baby and sang it lullabies in his deep, rumbling voice. "What if something goes wrong?" Willa asked one night in late February as she felt the baby kick strongly inside her. "We are so far from any doctor or midwife." "Nothing is going to go wrong," Quinton said with a confidence he did not quite feel. In truth, he was terrified, but he would not let Willa see that. "Women have been having babies without doctors for thousands of years, and I am here. I will take care of you both. Promise me," Willa said, gripping his hand. "Promise me that if something happens, if it comes down to a choice between me and the baby, you choose me." "Willa, promise me, Quinton. I need to hear you say it." "I promise," he said, though the words tasted like ash in his mouth. "But it is not going to come to that. You are strong and healthy, and this baby is going to come out squalling and perfect, and we are all going to be fine." Willa gave birth on a snowy night in March, while the wind howled outside and the fire roared in the hearth. Quinton had read every book on childbirth he could find during their trip to Denver, had quizzed the doctor there, until the man had finally written down detailed instructions. But nothing could have prepared him for the reality of it, for Willa's pain, for his own terror. "You can do this," he told her, wiping her sweat-dampened hair from her face. "You are the strongest person I know. You survived a mudslide, you chose a life in the mountains, you can do this." "I cannot," Willa gasped between contractions. "Quinton, I cannot. You can, and you will, and I am right here with you every step of the way." It took hours, long and painful and terrifying. But finally, as the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, a baby's cry filled the cabin. Quinton, his hands shaking, wrapped their daughter in a clean blanket and placed her in Willa's arms. She was perfect. Tiny and red-faced and squalling, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably be gray like her father's. Willa looked down at her and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Quinton sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around Willa, both of them staring in wonder at their daughter. "What should we name her?" he asked. "Rose," Willa said immediately. "After my mother, Rose Abbott." "Rose," Quinton repeated, testing the name. Then he smiled, that brilliant smile that still made Willa's heart skip. "It is perfect. She is perfect, and so are you." He kissed Willa's forehead. "Thank you for her, for choosing this life with me, for everything." "Thank you," Willa countered, "for saving me that day from the mudslide. For loving me, for giving me this beautiful life and this beautiful daughter." Little Rose stopped crying and blinked up at them with unfocused eyes, and Quinton gently stroked her tiny hand with one finger. She gripped it with surprising strength, and he laughed, delighted. "She is strong," he said proudly, "like her mother." The first weeks with Rose were exhausting but wonderful. Willa had never known it was possible to love someone so much, so immediately, so fiercely. Quinton was a devoted father, walking Rose around the cabin when she cried, changing her nappies without complaint, singing her to sleep in his deep voice. When spring came and the snow melted, they made the journey to Silver Ridge to have Rose baptized and to show her off. Reverend Michaels beamed as he blessed the baby. Martha cooed over her and knitted her a tiny blanket. And Josiah Turner, who had indeed found love with a widow who had moved to town that winter, congratulated them warmly. "She is beautiful," Josiah said, peering at Rose's sleeping face. "You both look very happy." "We are," Willa said simply, and it was the truth. On the ride back home, Rose sleeping peacefully in a sling against Willa's chest, Quinton reached over and took Willa's hand. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That it has been just over a year since the mudslide," Willa said. "1 year since my life changed completely, and I would not change a single thing about how it turned out. Not even the mudslide itself," Willa considered. "The mudslide was terrifying. It could have killed us both. But it also brought us together. It was the crucible that forged us in a way. So no, I would not change it. I would endure 100 mudslides if it meant ending up here with you and Rose." Quinton brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "I love you, Willa Abbott. More than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone." "I love you too," Willa said. "My mountain man, my protector, my heart." The years that followed were good ones. Rose grew into a spirited toddler with her father's gray eyes and her mother's determination. 2 years after Rose was born, Willa gave birth to a son they named James, after Quinton's father. 2 years after that, another daughter, Emma, joined the family. The cabin expanded with them, Quinton adding rooms and improvements as they needed them. The garden grew larger, the barn more full. They acquired chickens and a milk cow, and Quinton taught the children to ride almost as soon as they could walk. Life was not always easy. There were harsh winters when supplies ran low, and everyone was sick of being cooped up inside. There were close calls with wild animals and injuries from the hard work of mountain living. There were times when Willa missed female companionship and the conveniences of town life. But there was also love, abundant and ever-growing. There were summer evenings sitting on the porch watching the children play. There were winter nights curled up by the fire with Quinton's arms around her. There were 1,000 small moments of joy, of laughter, of contentment. When Rose turned 10, she asked her mother about how she and Quinton had met. Willa told her the story of the mail-order bride and the mudslide, of the mountain man who had saved her life and won her heart. "So if there had not been a mudslide, you never would have met Papa?" Rose asked, wide-eyed. "Probably not," Willa admitted. "I would have married someone else and had a completely different life." "But not us," James said, frowning. "We would not have been born." "No," Willa agreed. "You would not have." "Then I am glad there was a mudslide," Emma declared, "even if it was scary." "Me too," Willa said, pulling her youngest daughter into a hug. "I am very glad indeed." That night, after the children were in bed, Quinton found Willa on the porch, looking out at the mountains silhouetted against the stars. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping a blanket around both their shoulders and pulling her against his chest. "About mudslides and mail-order brides and mountain men," Willa said with a smile. "About how the worst day of my life turned into the best thing that ever happened to me." "I was thinking about that today too," Quinton admitted. "About how I almost did not go looking for that overturned coach. I heard it happen and I thought about ignoring it, about staying in my cabin where it was safe and dry. But something made me go, some instinct. And I found you." "Do you ever regret it?" Willa asked. "Giving up your solitary life for all this noise and chaos," Quinton laughed. "Not for a single second. That solitary life was not living, Willa. It was just existing. You taught me what it means to truly live, to love, to be part of something bigger than myself." He turned her in his arms so he could look into her eyes. "You and our children are the best thing that ever happened to me. This family, this life. It is everything I never knew I wanted. Even when the children are driving you mad, especially then." Quinton kissed her soft and sweet. "I love you, Willa Abbott, today, tomorrow, and all the days after that." "Forever," Willa agreed. "I will love you forever." They stood together on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, and looked out at the mountains that had witnessed their love story. The same mountains that had nearly killed them both but had instead given them everything. The mudslide had been a disaster, but it had also been a beginning. The beginning of a love that had weathered every storm, that had grown stronger with each passing year, that would endure as long as these mountains stood. And as an owl hooted in the distance, and the stars wheeled overhead, and the children slept peacefully inside their sturdy cabin, Willa thought about that frightened woman who had climbed into the stagecoach in Boston so long ago. She had been looking for safety, for security, for a practical solution to her problems. Instead, she had found adventure, passion, and a love so deep it had transformed her completely. She had found home. She had found family. She had found herself. And it had all started with a mudslide and a mountain man brave enough to shield her with his body until it passed. The years continued to flow like the mountain streams, constant and sure. Rose grew into a young woman with her mother's intelligence and her father's love of the wilderness. James became a skilled hunter and tracker, often accompanying Quinton on his trips into the high country. Emma was the wild one, climbing trees and catching frogs and declaring she would never leave the mountains, not ever. Quinton's hair grew more streaked with gray, and Willa found silver threads in her own hair when she brushed it each morning. But they were still deeply in love, still reaching for each other in the night, still finding joy in each other's company after all these years. One autumn day, when the aspens were turning gold and the air held the first hint of winter, Quinton took Willa back to the place where they had first met. The road had long since been repaired, the evidence of the mudslide mostly erased by time and weather. But they both remembered. "Right here," Quinton said, standing on the spot where the overturned coach had been. "This is where I first saw you, rain-soaked and terrified, reaching up to take my hand. And here," Willa said, moving to the rocky outcrop, "is where you covered my body with yours. Where you took blows meant for me. Where you saved my life." They walked to the spot together, and Quinton pulled her into his arms, just as he had that day so many years ago. But this time there was no mudslide, no danger, just two people who had built a beautiful life from the wreckage of a disaster. "You know what I thought," Quinton said, "in those moments when the mudslide was happening, when I was sure we were both going to die." "What?" "I thought that if I had to die, at least I was dying trying to save someone. At least my last act would be something good, something noble. I had been alone for so long, living only for myself, and in that moment I had a purpose. I had someone to protect." He cupped her face in his hands, those strong hands that had held her so many times over the years. "I did not know then that I was not just saving your life. You were saving mine too. We saved each other," Willa said softly. "From loneliness, from settling for less than we deserved, from lives that were safe but empty." "I would do it all again," Quinton said fiercely. "Every minute of it. The fear, the pain, the uncertainty. I would do it all again 1,000 times if it meant ending up here with you." "So would I," Willa said. "Though perhaps we could skip the actual mudslide next time." Quinton laughed, that deep, warm laugh that still made Willa's heart flutter. "Deal." They stood there for a long time, holding each other, remembering and grateful. The mountains rose around them, eternal and unchanging. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermal currents. The stream burbled nearby, the same stream where they had fished together on countless summer days, where their children had learned to swim, where life continued its endless cycle. Finally, as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, they walked back to their horses and rode home. The cabin came into view, smoke rising from the chimney, lights glowing in the windows. Rose was cooking dinner, James was chopping wood for the fire, and Emma was on the porch with Ghost's grandson, teaching the young dog tricks home. Family. Love. Everything that mattered was right here, born from a moment of disaster and a stranger's courage. The mail-order bride and the mountain man had found each other against all odds, had chosen each other when they could have chosen safety or solitude, and had built something beautiful and lasting from that choice. As Willa dismounted and her children ran to greet her, as Quinton's strong arms helped her down and his lips pressed a kiss to her forehead, she thought about all the letters she had written to Josiah Turner from Boston, all the careful planning she had done for a practical marriage. She had gotten something so much better. She had gotten passion and adventure and partnership. She had gotten late-night conversations and early morning kisses. She had gotten someone who saw her, really saw her, and loved everything he found. She had gotten Quinton, and he had gotten her. The woman who was brave enough to leave everything she knew, strong enough to survive a mudslide, wise enough to choose love over convenience. That night, after the children were in bed, Willa and Quinton sat on their porch as they did most nights, watching the stars emerge one by one. Quinton had his arm around her shoulders, and Willa leaned against his solid warmth, marveling as she still did after all these years at how perfectly they fit together. "Happy?" Quinton asked, as he often did. "Blissfully," Willa replied, as she always did, and it was true. Despite the hard work and the isolation and the challenges of mountain living, despite the gray in their hair and the aches in their joints and the worries that came with raising children, Willa was happy. Deeply, truly, completely happy. She thought about the woman she had been, that frightened girl on the stagecoach who thought she was traveling toward a loveless marriage and a lonely future. If she could go back and tell that woman what was really waiting for her, she would not believe it. That a mudslide would be the best thing that ever happened to her. That a mountain man with gray eyes and gentle hands would become her whole world. That she would find more love and joy in a small cabin in the Colorado mountains than she ever could have imagined in all her Boston daydreams. "What are you thinking?" Quinton asked, feeling the smile on her face. "That I love you," Willa said simply. "And that I am grateful for every moment, every day, every year we have had together. Even the hard moments, especially the hard moments. Because those are the ones that made us stronger, that proved what we have is real and lasting and true." Quinton pulled her closer and kissed the top of her head. "I am the luckiest man alive," he said, "and I thank God every day for that mudslide." "Me too," Willa agreed. "Though I am also glad we have not had another one." They laughed together, and the sound carried across the clearing and into the forest, where it mingled with the song of the night birds and the whisper of the wind through the pines. The mountains bore witness, as they had from the beginning, solid and eternal. And in the cabin behind them, 3 children slept peacefully, the product of a love that had been forged in terror and mud and desperation, but had become something beautiful and strong and enduring. Years later, when Rose married a good man from Silver Ridge and moved to town, when James built his own cabin on the far side of the mountain, when Emma grew up and surprised everyone by becoming a doctor in Denver, Quinton and Willa remained in their cabin, growing old together in the place where their love had begun. They never forgot the mudslide, the moment that had changed everything. They told the story to their grandchildren, who listened with wide eyes to the tale of the mail-order bride and the mountain man, the disaster and the rescue, the instant connection that had grown into a lifetime of love. "Tell us again, grandmother," the children would beg. "Tell us about the mudslide." And Willa would tell them, her hand clasped in Quinton's, their fingers still fitting together perfectly after all these decades. She would tell them about the terror and the courage and the choice she had made to follow her heart instead of her plans. "The best things in life often come from the worst moments," she would say. "Your grandfather saved my life that day. But more than that, he gave me a life worth saving. He gave me love and adventure and a family I cherish more than anything in the world. The mudslide could have killed us both. Instead, it gave us everything." And Quinton would smile that smile that still made her heart skip, even now, and add, "Sometimes the biggest disasters become the greatest blessings. All we have to do is be brave enough to hold on and see where they lead." When Willa passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, Quinton held her hand until the end. And when he followed her 6 months later, unable to bear the mountains without her, everyone agreed that it was fitting. They had been 2 halves of one whole, mail-order bride and mountain man, brought together by disaster and bound by love. They were buried together on the mountain they had both loved, overlooking the valley where their cabin still stood. The stone reads simply, Quinton and Willa Abbott, together in life and in death, united by love eternal. And sometimes, on stormy days when the rain pours down and the wind howls through the mountains, people swear they can see two figures standing on that ridge. A large man with long hair and broad shoulders, and a slender woman with her hand in his, both of them looking out at the mountains they called home, still together, still in love, still grateful for the mudslide that had brought them together and the love that had sustained them for a lifetime. Their story became legend in Silver Ridge and the surrounding mountains, told and retold, until no one was quite sure what was fact and what was embellishment. But the core truth remained constant. A mail-order bride arrived during a mudslide, and a mountain man shielded her with his body until it passed. In doing so, he saved her life, and she, in turn, saved his. They found in each other everything they had been missing, everything they had needed without knowing they needed it. And from that one moment of courage and connection, they built a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond, a love that weathered every storm and emerged stronger, a love that proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments, if only we are brave enough to embrace them. The end.